Erev Tov Rabotai, we're continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Terumot. We're up to Perek Yud Mishnah Zayin. Today's Mishnah should be Le'edun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayev, and Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam Began Eden, Amen. The Mishnah now returns to the laws of Chulin that absorb the flavor of Terumah, and primarily the Mishnah is going to discuss how the flavor of Terumah can be transferred through pickling. The Mishnah says, Zete Chulin shekibashan im zete Terumah. Chulin olives that were pickled with Terumah olives, which Mefarshim explained, the Rav writes, olives were often preserved by pickling them in a saltwater solution. So in our case, Chulin and Terumah olives were both pickled together in salt water. So the Mishnah says the halakha is like this. Pitzuei Chulin and Pitzuei Terumah, crushed Chulin olives that were pickled with crushed Terumah olives. Pitzuei Chulin im shelamei Terumah, or crushed Chulin olives that were pickled with whole Terumah olives. Or bemet Terumah, or even crushed Chulin olives that were pickled in water that had been used previously for pickling Terumah olives. Asur, they are prohibited to a non-Kohen. Mefarshim explain that this is because the pickling process causes olives to release their flavor even if they are whole, and it also causes olives to absorb flavor as long as those olives are crushed. So therefore, if crushed Chulin olives were pickled with whole Terumah olives, and for sure if they were pickled with crushed Terumah olives, the Chulin olives absorb the flavor of the Terumah olives, and that would be prohibited to a non-Kohen. Even if the Terumah olives were removed from the water before the Chulin olives were put in, the Chulin olives are still prohibited to a non-Kohen because they absorb the flavor of Terumah that is in the water. And the Mefarshim explain, salt water in which Terumah was pickled is forbidden to a non-Kohen because the salt water absorbs the flavor of the Terumah. So when crushed Chulin olives are pickled in that salt water, they absorb the flavor of Terumah from the salt water, thereby becoming prohibited to a non-Kohen. Aval, the Mishnah says, however, shlamei chulin in pitzuei terumah, whole chulin olives that were pickled even with crushed terumah olives, mutar. They are permitted to a non-Kohen because whole olives do not absorb flavor through pickling. And the Mefarshim explain, a food releases its flavor more easily than it absorbs flavor from another food. Therefore, while pickling can cause whole olives to release their flavor, it cannot cause them to absorb flavor. Only when the olives are crushed will they absorb the flavor from the other olives. So therefore, the status of the olives depends entirely on the state of the Chulin olives. If the Chulin olives are crushed, they become prohibited even if the Terumah olives are whole. However, if the Chulin olives are whole, they remain permitted even if the Terumah olives are crushed, and certainly if they are whole. That is how the Rav explains it, and the Mefarshim write, our Mishnah is discussing a case where the Terumah olives are not nullified, because if there would be 100 times as many Chulin olives as Terumah olives, the Terumah olives would be nullified. We spoke about this more in chapter 4, Mishnah 7. That is in Rabotai Mishnah Zayin. Mishnah Chet now continues. Now that we taught the halakha of Terumah and Chulin that were pickled together, the Mishnah is going to discuss a case in which a non-kosher fish was pickled with kosher fish. So the Mishnah says, Dag tamesh kibasho im dag tahor. If a non-kosher fish was pickled along with many kosher fish in one barrel, the halakha regarding the brine that is in the barrel is as follows. But before that, the Mefarshim explain, when fish are soaked in salt or vinegar, the salt draws out the body fluid of the fish. So the salt or vinegar in which the fish is pickled, along with the fluid that comes out of the fish, the Rambam says is called tzir, which is referred to as brine. So in our case, the barrel contains the brine of both kosher and non-kosher fish. So the Mishnah is going to discuss how much non-kosher brine makes the entire brine forbidden. So again, so we can note quickly what we say brine is. Brine is the salt or vinegar in which the fish is pickled along with the fluid that comes out of the fish. So the Mishnah says the halakha is like this. Kol garav shehu machazik satayim, any barrel that holds 2 se'ah of brine, אם יש בו במשקל 10 זוז ביהודה שהן 5 שלאים בגליל דג טמא, if the amount of non-kosher fish brine in the barrel equals the weight of 10 Yehuda zuz, which is equivalent to 5 Galil slaim, and the rest of the barrel contains kosher fish brine, tziro asur, all the brine in the barrel is prohibited. And before we continue, let us explain that last line of the Mishnah. A zuz and a sela are different coins. 1 sela equals 4 zuz. So the Mishnah uses these coins in terms of their weight. The coins used in Yehuda were larger than the coins used in Galil, and they weighed double the amount. So therefore, 10 Yehuda zuz equals 20 Galil zuz, which comes out to 5 Galil slaim. So if the amount of non-kosher fish brine in the barrel is 10 in weight equals 10 Yehuda zuz, which is 5 Galil slaim, and the rest of the barrel has kosher fish brine, because like again the Mefarshim say, the barrel contains both fish and brine. The measurements of the Mishnah are only for the brine, because the Mishnah means that the barrel was large enough to hold 2 se'ah of brine besides for the fish. Of these 2 se'ah, brine weighs 10 Yehuda zuz, which is 5 Galin slaim, and that came, the brine weighing 10 Yehuda zuz and 5 Galin slaim that came from the non-kosher fish in the barrel, while the rest came from the kosher fish. The Mishnah says tziro asul. All the brine in the barrel is asul, and this is because fish brine, the Mefarshim say, is very sharp, and it's not nullified even in a very large amount of kosher brine. Normally we know that forbidden food in a mixture is nullified as long as the permitted food is 60 times the amount of the forbidden food. But here, however, the Chachamim, the sages, required a much larger amount to nullify the non-kosher fish brine because of its sharpness. Therefore, even if in a total of 2 se'ah of brine, there are 10 zuz weight of non-kosher fish brine, which is a ratio of 960 to 1, all the brine is still prohibited. The Mefarshim explain how exactly we got this math. A se'ah is a measurement of volume, which is approximately 3.8 gallons, and the weight of a se'ah liquid is equal to the weight of 4,800 zuz, which is about 37.4 pounds. Therefore, 2 se'ah equals 9,600 zuz, making the proportions of 10 zuz to 2 se'ah 1 in 960. So the first opinion of the Mishnah, the Tana Kama, holds that since the brine is so sharp, it is not nullified unless it makes up less than 1 in 960 parts of the total mixture. Therefore, if out of the 2 se'ah of brine, 10 zuz is non-kosher brine, which is 1 in 960 parts of all the brine is forbidden. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, however, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says that a larger amount of non-kosher brine is needed to prohibit all the brine in the barrel. Revi'it b'satayim, the brine is prohibited only if there is a revi'it of non-kosher fish brine in a barrel containing 2 se'ah of brine, which is a ratio of 192 to 1. However, if there is less than a revi'it of non-kosher brine, the brine is permitted. Mefarshim explain 1 se'ah equals 96 revi'it, therefore 2 se'ah equals 192 revi'it. And the Mefarshim explain, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the non-kosher fish brine is not nullified in the usual 60 to 1 ratio. Nevertheless, he hasn't required that it has to be less than 1 in 960 parts of the total mixture. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda holds that as long as there are more than 192 parts total brine for each part non-kosher brine, the brine is nullified, and therefore even if the non-kosher brine measures 10 zuz or more, it is nullified as long as it is less than a revi'it, which is 1 in 902 parts of the mixture. Rabbi Yossi Omer, and Rabbi Yossi says, Echad mishisha sabod, the brine is prohibited only if the non-kosher brine is 1/16 of all the brine in the barrel. However, if the non-kosher brine is less than a 16th of the total brine, the brine is permitted, because according to Rabbi Yossi is being the most lenient. According to Rabbi Yossi, non-kosher brine is treated more leniently than other prohibited foods. And the reason for this is because brine is considered only the sweat of the non-kosher fish, meaning the moisture that oozes out of the fish as a result of salting, rather than part of the fish itself. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi says it's permitted midoraita on a biblical level. Now, although the Chachamim prohibited such brine, they did not require the usual ratio of 60 to 1. According to Rabbi Yossi, it's enough to have, it would only be prohibited if the brine is 1/16 of all, if the non-kosher brine is 1/16 of all the brine in the barrel. If the non-kosher brine is less than 1/16 of the total brine, the brine is permitted. And the Rav says in his Dibur HaMatchiv, the Rabbi Yossi Omer, he quotes Rabbi Yossi who says, Batel b'shishasar is nullified in 1/16. V'ilchat the Rav says the halacha is the tzir batel b'yoter me'elef, that the tzir, the brine, is cancelled out if it's more in more than 1,000. Im yesh yoter me'elef midag ta'or v'echad midag tameh, if there is 1,000 times more kosher fish every non-kosher fish has 1,000 times more kosher fish. Hakol mutar, everything's permitted. V'im lav, but if there is more than one non-kosher fish to every 1,000 kosher fish, hakol asur, everything is prohibited. And that is in Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen v'amen.